Hello, this is Michael McCarthy, and in this video we're going to take a look at Zookeeper and how it can help you organize and set up your 3ds Max scenes. We're just going to launch Zookeeper, and you see that we get a schematic view here. We have our scene objects view and our layers view kind of docked down at the bottom, and palettes view over the right so they can pop up and give us a little more real estate. And today we're going to take a look at just setting up some simple manipulators and custom attributes for objects. So I'm going to go to the palette and just drag out a sphere really quickly. You can see that gets added to our schematic view as well as the scene here. Next, I'm just going to drag out a material, and from this menu we'll pick standard, and then I'll hop into maps and just drag out a checker map for the diffuse. So instead of going into the right click menu, I'm just going to type in check, and you can see the checkers texture will come up, and that gets added to our object. Next, I quickly want to create a modifier stack with a couple of modifiers. So I'm going to click on the line between the sphere and the object node and the scene node and just insert a new modifier stack. Then from there, I'm going to add in two simple modifiers. So I'll drag out a taper. See, the taper modifier gets added there. We can adjust that however we like from here. And I'll drag out a stretch. And again, we can just kind of scrub this to see that stretching over there in the viewport, and that all works pretty well. At this point, I just want to point out Zookeeper's ability to work in conjunction with the 3ds Max scene. We've already seen how interactively it can work with selecting scene objects, setting properties and selecting things with layers, and even doing things like docking it. So I'm going to just go ahead and dock it here in this view. And then interacting with the scene, especially in the schematic view, there's a number of things you can do. There's many different nodes that can be represented in the schematic view, and if you double click on any of them, they'll bring you to that portion in the 3ds Max stack. So you can see I double clicked on the base object here, and it brings me to the sphere. If I want to select the taper, I can click on that. So at any point, I can kind of select any point in the stack, as well as adjust things like material. So I'll just double click on this material and it brings that up in the material editor. If I want to do things like run a material preview or other stuff that may not be accessible in these nodes, I can easily do that. And if I want to just select a map in order to edit just the map there in the material editor, it will bring that up. Also, if I need to do things like right click on a scene node and bring up the curve editor or set properties for that, I can easily do that and quickly bring up these Max utilities. So Zookeeper's goal is to set up an environment where all the different selecting objects, layers, properties, and schematic views work very tightly and integrated with each other, but also where Zookeeper itself works very tightly with Max so that you're not isolated from the application itself. So from here, I'm just going to set up a quick manipulator. And to do that, I'm just going to right click. I'm going to type in slider, and you can see I get my slider helper there. I'm going to drag that down, and all this while you see that we're working with auto layout node. This is a really great feature of Zookeeper where it allows you to lay out the nodes automatically and still have some control over where they are and how they get adjusted. So I'm going to move this slider over here so that I can adjust it and set it to the taper. And this is really easy to set up in Zookeeper. I'll just remove this base object node because I don't need that at the moment. And then I'm going to drag out this value, set it to a Bezier float, and pipe that into the amount of our taper. Now we have this set up to our taper. If I just move this in the viewport, so I'll adjust this up a little bit, and then I'm going to name it taper. I'll set a minimum value of negative 1.5 and a maximum value of 1.5. And if I just grab my manipulator, now you can see that that is all set up and wired in this view, which is really helpful, very fast, easy to set up. And the best thing about it is if I ever need to come back to this and adjust something, I can easily do that. Everything's very visual and laid out here for me to kind of set that up. So we'll set up one more slider, and then before we do that, I'm actually going to go into the coordinates rollout of this material and just bring up the tiling really quickly so that we can see a bunch of checkers in the viewport. Helps us when we look at the deformation of the object. And then I'm going to go in, just right click, and create a plane angle manipulator. So here's the plane angle manipulator. I'll drag it down slightly, and I want to be working with the transform of this so that I can set that manipulator to work. So I'm going to just drag that out quickly. I'll drag out the rotation, the Y rotation. And that's really what I want to be working with. And I'm going to just drag this over here so it's easy for me to wire in. Then I'll wire this in here. Before I do that, I'm just going to type in 40 for a distance and rotate this in the viewport so that it lines up with the object. And then all I need to do is wire this into the angle, and I've set up my manipulator. So I can go in to select and manipulate, and this will rotate that object around because it's wired into the Y. I could wire it into any other axis I want, and I can easily adjust that taper. So you can really set up manipulators and all sorts of things in Zookeeper very, very easily. Now to tidy up this view, I'm just going to hide some of the things that I don't necessarily need. At this point, I might get rid of the scene nodes for the sliders here, and I'll just click on delete to remove those, and then I have those two sliders, and then I might use the filters to just hide some of these nodes. So I might not need access to the material itself, but I might still want the actual texture to double click on that and adjust some things if I need to, or adjust things in the rollouts for parameters or coordinates. The other things I might not want to see are these two controllers which lead up to the final one, and I could just go ahead and hide a couple of controllers, and you can see them get subdued there by opacity. So this is a great feature of Zookeeper where you can kind of filter and bring down the opacity of any nodes that you have in the scene. If you want them to be completely hidden, you can just click on this icon and then they'll be completely hidden. So I can drag this guy back over here, and then we have a nice layout of everything that is going on in the scene. Very simple to look at and easy to deal with. If we need it even more minimalized, we can actually click on this icon here, which makes sure that you only see any parameters that happen to be wired. If we actually just maximize all of these, you see that we'll only see the amount, and there isn't anything wired into stretch, and we see the angle for these manipulators here. That's a really nice packaged view of everything that we have here once we've set it all up so that it's easy to adjust. The other thing that you'll notice is what we have is between our material and our object node here is a little dotted line, and this is really helpful. It lets us know what is hidden, or that there is something hidden between this texture and the actual input node here. And the same with this Bezier float, because there's a couple of different transform controllers that are between this and are actually hidden. So it gives us an idea of what is actually in the scene while still letting us know what nodes are wired to. Okay, so the next thing I want to look at is some custom attributes. These are really easy to set up in Zookeeper. If I just expose those rollouts, you can see that every single node here in Zookeeper has a custom attribute rollout, which is really very helpful. And you can add custom attributes to pretty much anything at any level. So if we want to add it to a modifier, we can. If we want to add it to the base object, we can. We can add it to materials as well. So I'm just going to go in here and drag out the custom attribute and just say new custom attribute. This will get popped in down here,